Hi, this is CJ, and this is 316 Seconds. Let's go. He heard the sound of the crowd approaching. He looked to his side. His three closest friends were still in peaceful slumber. Perhaps the noise of the crowd will wake them up, seeing as they hadn't stayed up to be with him, even after he had pleaded with them to do so. He drew a deep breath and once again whispered his willingness to obey the will of his Father, regardless of how difficult it was going to be. It was time. As the mob made their way to him in the pale light of the moon's rays, he saw him, the one who for 30 silver coins had betrayed him, the one who had held the purse strings and dispersed the funds for his ministry, the betrayer. He hugged and kissed him, calling him teacher, but he knew his heart, and so he asked him, "You betray me with a kiss?" The three sleeping friends were now wide awake, glancing from side to side in confusion. The other two melted into the crowd quickly, but the fisherman realized what was happening. This is what the master had talked about at the dinner table. In a panicked, heroic moment, he grabbed the high priest's servant. "Release him at once," he screamed to the soldiers who had seized his lord. Adonai locked eyes with the would-be hero and shook his head slowly to show his disapproval of the fisherman's chosen path. As the agitated fisherman stared into the master's eyes, there was that unending pool of compassion. He had seen that look many times in the past. He saw it when they fed the crowd at the mountainside. He had seen it every time the master had performed a supernatural act. Love, he thought. Who else will do this? The fisherman clenched his jaw. He had to save the Savior. All eyes held the angry fisherman in their gaze as he swung his blade and chopped off the ear of his hostage. That will show them that he meant business, he thought to himself. In reality, he had acted in fear and desperation. He wanted to prove to the master that, contrary to their earlier conversation, that he would be there for him always and would not betray him, not even once, and definitely not thrice. The servant clutched the side of his face and screamed. Ah! His eyes shut in pain as his earlobe and blood from the gash streamed down his collar. He heard the audible gasp of his colleagues and sensed them take a couple of steps back in horror. No one was going to come to his help. He would have done the same. Soon he felt a couple of warm, calloused palms hold his face. As he opened his eyes trembling, there holding him, kneeling beside him, was the one he had come to see arrested, this Jesus of Nazareth. The Savior shook his head and almost chuckled as he saw Peter fight to save him. That was so him, spontaneous but deeply loyal. That will come in handy when he would have to lead his brothers. But for now, it was an unwelcomed interruption in the course of the night that will change history forever. The soldiers had no patience for this late-night drama. They aggressively pulled up the healer from the ground and shoved him towards Caiaphas, the high priest responsible for the slaughter of the lamb that will cleanse Israel from her sins. It was the Passover after all. The crowd dispersed, the lights from their handheld torches following the soldiers who barked out orders at the Messiah as they made their way down the street headed for the temple. Two men remained behind, the servant whose ear had been put back, and the culprit fisherman who had been chided by the Master. Both men instinctively knew that they had been in the company of greatness. The God-man was alone in the midst of the crowd. His friends had run away when he was arrested. He knew his singular ability to deliver mankind from their depravity would require him to travel to a cross all by himself, abandoned by men, forsaken by God. As the day progressed, he was wounded, beaten, scourged, and ultimately sentenced to death. To the untrained eye, to the loyal disciple, this was the least desirable end for the Son of God. He was headed for the death of a lowly criminal. How could this be the culmination of a radical and wall-gripping 3-year ministry? This was not a Good Friday. To the omniscient and loving God of all heaven and earth, there was not a better day in the history of forever. Finally, the seed of the woman would crush the head of the serpent, as he had spoken in Eden. This was the best Friday yet. As the God-man who had become sin hung between heaven and earth, the Father turned his back on the Son and all the while focused his attention on us. Salvation was free, but it cost the Father, the Son.